Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel and Happy New Year. The piece that I'm going to show you today is actually nothing to do with this piece behind because I deleted the original introduction video to the piece that I'm going to show you today. So I'm having to re-record it, which is slightly confusing. Anyway, the piece that I'm going to show you today features a brand new product from Dixie Belle Paint. You may recognise this packaging, but you won't recognise this colour. That's because it's a brand new shade of Voodoo Gel Stain, which is Dixie Belle's water-based wood stain. And I'm going to show you how I used it. So this is the piece that I'm going to be working on today. As you can see, it's pine. It's a very lovely piece and it's waxed, which is quite common for pine to be waxed, especially the pieces that I pick up. I'm going to take the handles off, give it a quick hoover inside and out because it has some kind of cobwebs and dust on there from being in storage, and then I'm going to strip the wax. This is quite an important step. If you have got a wax piece of furniture, don't be tempted to paint over it. Obviously I'm going to be doing like a bit of a stain and paint combo on this one, so I do need to remove all of the wax, but the same applies if you are going to paint a piece as well. I usually use a carbide scraper first, but the wax on this had been kind of worn down, so I didn't really need to use that step. So I'm going to go straight in with my white spirits and wire wool. I always turn the piece on its side or back as well, so that I'm working on a flat surface, so the white spirits doesn't run off and drip everywhere. And then I always give it a really good clean with Dixie Belle's White Lightning afterwards. This is a degreasing cleaner, which is important because sometimes white spirits can leave like an oily residue behind. Once it's completely dry, because you don't want to be sanding damp or wet wood, I gave it a sand with my electric sander. This is a 180 grit first of all, and then I went in with a 220 sanding sponge and just give it a little kind of once over just to make sure it was all super smooth. So if you haven't gathered by now, you'll know that I'm going to do a little bit of wood staining on this piece. And you might be tempted. Wood stain is a funny game. It is a funny game. So when you're just using a coloured paint, you know if you've chosen a red paint, you're going to end up with a red piece. Staining, wood staining, is a little bit more tricky because lots of factors can affect the outcome. So the type of wood, the age of the wood, how dry the wood is, all those things and more can affect how the stain takes and how it looks. So just because you might have two pine pieces and you use the same colour stain on both of those pieces doesn't necessarily mean the outcome is going to be exactly the same on those two pieces. You may be tempted as well to think, when you've sanded your piece down, let me just see if I can, there we go. When you've sanded your piece down, you might be tempted to think, well, that actually looks really nice as it is. I don't want to do anything to it. I just want to preserve that kind of raw look. However, when you apply any kind of top coat, whether it be wax or a water-based varnish, it will slightly change the colour. Wax, less so, because obviously it doesn't kind of soak into the wood grain. So I would say that if you didn't want to do anything to the wood and keep it as naturally looking as possible, so you didn't want to put a stain on, you didn't want to put a colour wash on, wax is probably your safest bet, although over time it might turn more kind of golden-y colour. So the test of what will happen if I was to just get a clear varnish and apply it straight onto this raw wood, how you get a kind of indication of what's going to happen when you do that, because it will change colour, is use water, especially if you're using a water-based top coat. If you're going to be using an oil, then you can use a quick swipe of white spirits because it's slightly different. But water is a good indication of what colour the wood is going to go. And all you need to do is spray a bit on the surface of your piece. And can you see this patch here? It's already turned orange. So if I was to put a clear varnish on here without doing anything else to it, that is the colour or a similar-ish colour to what it'd go. So it's just going to give me an orangey pine look, which, I'll be honest, not many people want. So the way to combat that is to get rid of those orangey tones. Now you can either do that with a colour wash, which is just watered down paint, or you can do it with a wood stain, and I'm going to be using a wood stain. These are the brand new shades of Dixie Belle's Voodoo Gel Stain, which is their water-based stain. There's already quite an extensive colour range, but they've added to them. The one I'm going to use today is called Fireside Ash, and as you can see, it's kind of got a grey undertone to it, which is going to be perfect at cancelling out the orange tones in this wood, but I'll talk more about that in a second. It's super easy to use. I'm using an applicator pad to apply it. I'm going straight over onto the wood. I am putting down a light spritz of water on the surface first, and that just helps your paint take evenly because it is a water-based stain. And as you can see, I'm just applying my stain onto the applicator pad and then rubbing it in the direction of the wood grain. So as I just mentioned, you can achieve this look very similarly with a colour wash, but why would you use a gel stain over a colour wash? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is that it's a ready mixed product. It already has the correct amount of pigment in there. You don't have to water it down or anything like that. Obviously a paint wash, you have to water down. The other thing is that it's a very, very good consistency to work with. So because it is a gel stain, they are really easy to apply. They're not too drippy. They also have a really good open time, which means you can work it into the wood grain without it drying down too quickly. So this has been dry overnight, and you can see that it is much paler than what it was before, and if I was to top coat that now, it wouldn't go orange like it did when I sprayed the water on it. I am going to do a second coat just because the first coat that I did was very kind of thin, and obviously you can layer these stains, so if you wanted kind of more of a stronger colour, you can absolutely do that. So I am going to do that with this just to make sure we are going to eliminate all of those orange tones. So the second layer just goes on exactly the same as the first one. So as I said, it's a buildable formula, which means you can add as many layers as you want. So if I wanted this super pale to increase that kind of pale raw wood look, I'd just add more layers. If one coat does it, then you can just leave it there. As you can see, the second coat is just giving it that kind of raw bleached wood effect, and it's completely eliminating all of the orange. Just while I'm waiting for that second coat to dry, I'm going to show you quickly the comparison between one that already exists and the new colour, because you might be thinking, if you can't see them side by side, you might be thinking that these two are very similar. So this is Au Naturel. This is one that has already been out with Dixie Belle for a while now. It's very, very popular because it gives you that kind of bleach wood effect, and the only other one in this range that's light is the white, and you might not want to do a whitewash effect. So Fireside Ash and Au Naturel look very similar until you get them side by side. So in the tube you can see a little bit of difference, but I've got a scrap of pine here and I'm going to show you they are different. I'm hoping it'll pick it up in this light because it's very dark, but anyway, here we go. There's my scrap of pine. So this is the Au Naturel shade. My tube is very well loved. There's only a little bit left in here because, like I say, I do use it quite often. So that is Au Naturel. And this is the one that I've just been using, which is Fireside Ash. So this one, Fireside Ash, is slightly lighter. It also is less brown. So I'm not going to rub it in yet. I'll show you next to side by side. So this is Fireside Ash. This is Au Naturel. This is more of a taupey tan colour. This is paler and it's also a more ashy tone. So this is really good at cancelling out oranges and reds. This is beautiful, don't get me wrong. Like I say, I've used it a lot. I would probably use this more on oak. To kind of still retain a little bit of warmth, whereas this, if you've got any orange or red tones in your wood, this is going to cancel them out because it's a cooler tone. I'm just going to rub it in to the wood grain so you can see the difference. So there you go. This is Au Naturel. This is Fireside Ash. When it's rubbed into the grain, even though this is quite a pale wood anyway, you can still see the difference. Like I say, this leans more towards brown and it's got a slightly warmer tone to it. This leans more towards grey and it's got a cooler tone to it. So that is why this has worked so well on the pine piece underneath, because obviously this is orangey and the cooler tones cancel out the orange, whereas this is just a slightly warmer tone colour. They're going to give beautiful effects no matter what. Don't forget as well that it obviously is going to differ depending on the wood. This is a new piece of pine, so if you use this on oak or a different piece of pine, obviously it's going to be slightly different. But I wanted to show you them side by side because I know lots of people will say, well, Fireside Ash looks the same as Au Naturel. Well, in fact, it actually isn't. And you didn't think I'd done, or did you? Did you think I'd finished? Well, I haven't. I'm going to do something a little bit different on this. I've never actually done this effect before. So I'm going to do like a dipped effect or colour block effect. As you can see from this angle, I haven't really bothered too much about the bottom half or bottom third of this cabinet because I'm going to paint it. So I'm going to mark out with my tape measure and a pencil. I'm going to mark out a line straight across the piece. Obviously I'm going to go around the sides as well because that would just look weird if I didn't. I'm not very good at drawing a straight line, so it took me a while to do this. And then I'm going to get some masking tape and mask off that line. The reason I'm using pencil is because I knew I was going to have to place the tape several times before I got it right, and chalk would just rub off. And I'm also using a dark colour as well, so I knew that would cover the pencil line. But if you're using a lighter shade, it might be worth using chalk because sometimes pencil lead will show through a lighter colour. So I'm just really carefully making sure the tape is kind of bending around all the areas of trim and the doors. It was very, very fiddly and took me a couple of attempts. It was actually easier to rip the tape into smaller pieces and get them to join up. This tape is painter's tape. It's for delicate surfaces. So it's going to be perfect for this because obviously I've not long stained this, although I haven't top coated it yet. And I'm just making sure that the line is straight for a start, and obviously that it goes all in the trim because I'm going to be painting the bottom half of this. When you're putting tape down as well, just make sure you rub your finger really well to make sure it's stuck down properly on the surface. I know that sounds obvious. The other little trick that I've got when it comes to painting lines and stripes with masking tape is to use a clear coat first. So this is Dixie Belle's clear coat in satin, and I'm just painting over the join of the tape. So that's going to seal the tape and hopefully eliminate any bleed through. So obviously bleed through is when paint seeps underneath the tape and doesn't give you a nice crisp line. So like I say, this technique stops that gap from happening, and it seals that kind of seam shut, if you like. So it's less likely for paint to seep underneath. Obviously, before you paint, you've got to let this dry. It wouldn't work otherwise. So it does add a little bit of time, but it is definitely worth it. Once that really thin coat of satin clear coat has completely dried, another tip when you are using masking tape or painting lines is to paint away from the tape, paint away from the join. Obviously the last thing you want to do is force paint underneath that tape. So I'm using a lighter hand than usual. I'm quite heavy-handed when it comes to painting, so I'm just using a super light hand. I'm using a little brush and I'm just feathering my paint away from the edge of that join to ensure that I don't force any paint underneath. Once I'd painted along that line all the way over, I then just filled in the rest of the kind of bottom third of the cupboard. The colour that I'm using is Collard Greens. Like I need an excuse to use a green shade, I'm here for any green colour. And I also think this is going to contrast quite nicely against the pale top half. So this has got brilliant coverage. It's one of my favourite ever shades of green. This is the second coat going on, and the reason I'm showing you the second coat is because that's when you want to take your tape off. Your final coat of paint, however many coats that takes, 2 or 3, usually 2, is when you want to take your painter's tape off, when that paint is still wet. Again, that eliminates any kind of peeling, because if you let your paint dry and then peel your tape off, some of that paint may come away. So some of the green paint may come away with your tape. If it's wet, it won't do that. So paint your second coat. I worked in small areas, so I did the side first, did the whole kind of second coat of the side, and then remove the tape and then move round to the front. Once I was happy with that second coat, the moment of truth, and there you go. There's your straight line. It worked really well. I'm going to finish this piece with clear wax because I love a wax finish, but Voodoo Gel Stain is compatible with all of the Dixie Belle top coats. And a little tip for you, if you're in a cold workshop like mine, just hold your hairdryer over your wax tin for a couple of seconds. You don't want to melt your wax, you just want to soften it up a little bit, and it'll be a lot easier to apply. Also, another tip is I always use a sponge to apply my wax. For years I used a brush and kind of got inconsistent results. I do sometimes use a brush every now and again if I've got a lot of detail, but if I'm doing a flat surface like this one, I'll usually use a sponge, and it gives you a nice even coat of wax over your piece with no streakiness. And then always buff your wax once it's been sat on the surface for about half an hour. This removes any excess product and gives it that really nice sheen and just helps your product dry down quicker. So this is the finished look. You can see the detail on the top there. It's still got a hint of kind of golden tone to it, but it's eliminated all the orange. A couple of close-ups of the hopefully straight line. If anybody tells me in the comments it's not a straight line, I'm not your friend anymore. And here's the finished look. So I think it's safe to say I found my new favourite shade of Voodoo Gel Stain. I will be trying out all the others as well, because if this one's anything to go by, they're all going to be absolutely amazing. Thank you for watching the video as always. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you next time. Bye.